Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to another FIFA 22 video where today I'm going to be sharing with you 3 of my top tips that you need to learn to master FIFA 22. Now FIFA 22 is obviously a very good game in my opinion this year, but it is a difficult game in some aspects, and there are a couple of things that if you can master them and if you can become very good at these 3 things we're going to be sharing with you today, you're going to see massive uptake in your performances in FIFA, and obviously it's going to entail that you win more games. And then if you're winning more games, naturally you're going to be having a lot more fun on the game. So without further ado, going into that very first tip that you need to learn, it is to sprint less in midfield. Now this is something that even myself still, I'm a decent player myself, I still find myself falling into this trap every now and again, and it is something that it's very tempting to do, is to run into that midfield spot and just run forwards. And if you see some space, you want to drive into it. You can see in a lot of the clips that we're going to be showing you right here, you can see just the patience that we have in midfield where we're not running in that midfield area, and it's going to allow us to have more chances. You can see Son put that away very nicely. But running in midfield and sprinting in midfield is one of the biggest reasons why a lot of people concede goals, because you think that you've got a space and you run into it and you think, I'm going to drive into this space, and then you end up losing possession, and then maybe you concede from that opportunity. You see Kante intercepts the ball right there, and instead of driving into this space that's in front of Pogba, a lot of people would hold that sprint button there and would drive into that space with Pogba. But we're going to be patient, and we're going to, because you can see his midfielder is trying to get across to cover the passing lane, there is that pass into Son. So rather than sprint, and if we take a sprint here, he's already controlling that play. He's going to be able to get across, he's going to make a tackle in, and he's going to then take the ball off us. And you can see he's already got a couple of players forward, so he could easily score a goal. Instead, we're going to actually just straight away pass that into Son and let Son do the work. And you can see how the attack develops then down the left-hand side. Silva moves into that inside spot onto Firmino, and then the goal eventually develops from there. And the chance comes from there, and that all comes from just not sprinting in that midfield area. And that's a mistake I see a lot of people make, especially a lot of people that play against me. They think that they have the opportunity to run into space, and then they end up losing possession, and then they end up scoring from that, and that maybe then creates a misconception of something else in the game. In reality, it's just a simple silly mistake that they potentially made. Now, one of the things that's really important as well when it comes to playing in that midfield area is not being too predictable as well, making sure that you're always passing the ball, you're always moving it off, rather than holding that sprint button down. But there are some occasions where it is okay to sprint. There are some occasions where it is okay to take that space, and generally it is, I find, more in the case on the wing rather than in the midfield area. If you're on the wing, there's not as much danger. You've obviously got one side of the pitch that can then potentially go out for a throw-in, and that can obviously yield a potential throw-in for you, and then you can still, utilize the attack. But it's okay to sprint down the wings, but I would always recommend trying to avoid that midfield area, because the midfield is a lot more packed, so you're a lot more likely to lose possession of the ball. And then obviously more likely, with counterattacks being so strong in the game, likely to concede that counterattack, which obviously isn't a great idea. Now, the second tip that I'm going to be sharing with you today is to not force passes forwards. This is, again, one thing that I see a lot, and one thing that I've actually covered previously in a previous video, and a lot of people do this. A lot of people think, in this example right here, Salah's got the ball. A lot of people do 2 things. They'd either do option number 1, and they just hold the sprint button down and try and outrun the left back, and then would just try and sprint down the wing, or they would turn and they would see Son. You can see Son at the bottom of the screen. He might make that run. As you can see, there's some good space for Son. A lot of people would just then lob that over the top. One thing that I do, and this works really well for me, is instead of doing either of those things, because you can see we haven't got a lot of bodies forward. He's got 5-6 players in the shot there, whereas we've only really got 2 players that are just about to cross the halfway line. So there's not a high probability in this occasion for the counter-attack. So one thing that I do a lot is I recycle the ball. Just don't pass it forwards. I just wait for my fullback, wait for Hakimi to get forwards, wait for him to get up, and then just don't be afraid to pass the ball backwards and just retain possession. People might say it's really boring. You can see then that opportunity right at the end of that little play there. We did try and force a pass into Firmino, and then we lost possession. My opponent had a counter-attack. We did end up stopping it, but you can see the difference where when we recycled that play, how we held on to possession for an extra 10-15 seconds, versus then when we did try and force the ball forwards, and then we lost it immediately because there was too many defenders back. And this is, again, something I see a lot of people do. A lot of people, again, do it when they play against me. And you do see this with a lot of the lower caliber players, and that's why they are lower caliber players, because they don't think smart. And again, people might perceive that, oh, if you're just passing the ball sideways or if you're passing the ball backwards, it's boring. It's not passing the ball backwards or sideways just for the sake of it. It's if there isn't a high probability pass forwards and there isn't a good opportunity for you to play the pass forwards. If it's quite risky to play that pass forwards and you lose possession and concede a counter attack, you can only have yourself to blame, irrespective of if you get cheesed out of a goal, because you can sit back and say, well, if I didn't give the ball away there, if I didn't force the ball forwards, I wouldn't have conceded the goal. You can see how that, composure there, just moving the ball around, ended up with Bernardo Silva scoring that goal right there. And just having that composure, switching the play as well, but not always looking for that forward pass. Don't always be rushing forwards. If the ball's there, like you see in a couple of these examples, if the ball is there, then we can go forwards and we can score the goals very, very easily. And then the third thing that we are going to cover, the third big tips, we've kind of covered one for attacking, one for the midfield, and one for defending. And it is to avoid trying to lunge into tackles, obviously defensively. Now, this can be quite difficult. And one of the things that you always need to remember is to try and avoid holding the sprint button down when you're defending. Especially I find when you're jockeying, using the left trigger to jockey, especially in real tight situations, because when you come up against the real top players, the Neymars, the Mbappes, the Dembélés, you need to be able to do that. Now, an example like this, it is okay to lunge into a tackle because there's plenty of space there out on the wing. You can see there's plenty of space there for Hakimi to push him out to the byline, so there's not really the risk. He didn't have many players forwards, he hasn't got many options, so it's okay for us to slide, because even if we miss and he gets round us, there's still, we've still got the numbers back to be able to deal with counter attack, and then we slide and we do end up winning the tackle. Unfortunately, he goes out for a throw in his way. But it's okay in these situations. Again, we lose the ball, but because there's not too much danger on there, we're pushing him wide. Pogba can just slide him out for a throw and lets the team get back into position. So knowing when you can make those judgments, when you can slide and jump into tackles here, you can see how Kante, we do defend this situation really, really well. We don't sort of bite, we don't jump into tackles. We wait until there's a prime opportunity to take the ball, and then that 2-on-1 situation is dealt with very, very easily. So making sure that you avoid lunging and diving into tackles is a massive thing with defending. You've really got to have the composure in defense to not do that unless you are 100% certain you can win the ball. I also do never press the B button to tackle. Weirdly, it might sound strange, I never actually press the tackle button. You just move in with the left trigger, move into the tackle, and then just essentially just run into them. You don't actually need to actually press B and tackle, because when you press that B button and tackle, if you miss, you can't get that player back into the game. He's now out of the game. He's out of the attack. You've now got one less player to deal with it. So making sure that you don't actually press that B button, you just hold the left trigger and then you just kind of run into your opponent, because the jockey button is going to allow you to move quickly if he changes direction, and it's going to allow you to then be able to stop those attacks. So they are my 3 best tips when it comes to mastering FIFA 22. If you can master each one of these tips and genuinely get a lot better at these, you will see your performances in FIFA dramatically improve, because these are 3 of the key core principles that you need to master in terms of being brilliant at this year's FIFA. So make sure you drop a thumbs up if you did enjoy the content and you want to see more. Make sure you subscribe as well if you are new to the channel. But that is all for today, guys. Have an awesome day. I'm out.